Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we try to cut through the noise and get straight to the insights that matter. If you've been following AI at all, you know large language models, LLMs, like ChatGPT, they're just everywhere now.
Oh, absolutely. They're almost, synonymous with AI for many people.
Totally. And they do amazing things, generating content, writing code, really impressive outputs, which is why they're so widespread.
Indeed. And, well, with tools this powerful, it was maybe inevitable that researchers would start thinking about some really fascinating, maybe even controversial applications.
Like what?
Well, one of the big ones, a really intriguing idea, was that maybe these LLMs could simulate human psychology.
Simulate human psychology, like stand in for people in studies.
Exactly. Maybe even replace human participants. I mean, think about the potential savings in time, cost.
Wow, okay. That's a huge claim. Huge implications.
It is. And that's the core question that researchers like Sarah Schroeder and her colleagues from Bielefeld and Purdue universities decided to investigate.
So this new preprint tackles that head on. What's their mission here?
Yeah, their paper, it's titled Large Language Models Do Not Simulate Human Psychology. And they basically critically examine this whole idea. They look at the conceptual arguments, but also bring in some pretty compelling empirical evidence that suggests we should probably, pump the brakes a bit.
Pump the brakes. Okay.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to figure out if LLMs really think like humans, or is it more that they just talk like them?
That's the crucial distinction right there.
Okay. So before we get into their critique, let's just quickly ground ourselves. What is an LLM actually doing when it generates text, fundamentally?
At its core, it's actually quite simple conceptually, though complex in practice. It's predicting the probability of the next word or token based on all the text data it's learned from.
So it's just sophisticated pattern matching.
Pretty much. It's learned the patterns of how words follow each other in vast amounts of text.
So like that analogy they use in the paper about the die with billions of sides.
Exactly that one. For each possible input text, an LLM essentially creates a die with billions of sides and then rolls the die to decide the next word.
Okay. So if it's just statistical prediction, probabilities, what does that mean for understanding meaning or truth? Is that even part of the process?
Well, that's the key, isn't it? There's no inherent mechanism inside the LLM that explicitly tries to understand meaning or truth like a human does. It's all about those probabilities, those patterns.
Right. But despite that, they are useful in research, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. People use them for, helping with scientific writing, doing literature reviews, even data annotation sometimes.
I even heard some people suggested listing ChatGPT as a co-author.
Yeah, that happened, which, really shows how useful people perceive them to be, even early on.
Okay, so it's easy to see the temptation then. Why researchers got excited about simulating psychology if they're good at all this other stuff.
Exactly. The hypothesis was really appealing. You could say, give an LLM a prompt like you are a U.S. American woman over 40, then give it a stimulus, maybe a short story or a scenario and a questionnaire. And the idea was it would spit back responses that look just like what a human participant would give.
And that would save time, money, avoid privacy issues. I get the appeal.
Totally. And there were some early results that really seemed to back this up.
Like the Dillian study.
Yeah, Dillian and colleagues in 2023, they found this really striking 0.95 correlation between GPT 3.5 and human moral judgments across hundreds of scenarios.
0.95, that's incredibly high, almost perfect alignment.
It really is. And other work seemed to push it further. GPT-4o was even perceived as slightly better on morality, trustworthiness, correctness compared to humans, even ethicists. And then you had models like Centaur, which was specifically fine-tuned on millions of human responses from experiments, explicitly trying to predict and simulate human behavior.
So for a while, it really looked promising, like this could actually work.
It definitely seemed that way, like we were on the edge of something really transformative for psychology research.
Okay, but this is where Schroeder and her colleagues come in and say, hold on a minute.
Exactly. Despite those promising numbers, their paper argues pretty strongly that LLMs don't reliably simulate human psychology.
So what are their main arguments? Why this skepticism?
Well, one of the first points is how LLMs react, or maybe don't react, to instructions the way we intend, especially when you're trying to get them to act like a specific person.
What do you mean?
So previous research showed that if you give them kind of simple prompts, they might give inaccurate recommendations if you're using them as, say, a user simulation. Or even in those moral judgment tasks, other studies found LLM judgments could shift way more dramatically based on just how you frame the question compared to how humans react.
Huh. So the way you ask the question matters more to the LLM than maybe it should.
It seems so. The idea is maybe the text prompts we use are just too simple to really capture the complexity of a human persona, leading to sort of weird or unreliable responses.
Okay, that makes sense. What about consistency? If I ask the same model, the same thing twice, maybe worded slightly differently?
That's another big issue they raise. There can be significant inconsistencies. Switch the model, you might get different results. Rephrase the prompt slightly, different results again. It's not like a human who has a relatively stable sense of self. The LLM's persona seems really fragile, highly sensitive to the exact text it gets.
Which makes it tricky for research, obviously. You need reliability.
Precisely.
And psychology isn't just about the average response, right?
Mm.
It's about the variation, the diversity in a population. How do LLMs handle that?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. They often fail there too. They might capture the average human response okay in some cases.
But not the spread.
Right. They often miss the variance, the diversity. One study found ChatGPT personas seemed credible but lacked clear-cut opinions compared to real people. The responses were kind of bland, maybe, less varied.
And they struggle with cultural diversity, too, you mentioned, even if you specifically ask for it.
Yes, even when prompted. It's hard for them to replicate that richness.
Okay, so issues with instructions, consistency, diversity. What about the actual content? Does it reflect human biases accurately, or does it have its own weird biases?
That's the bias issue. LLMs, like any machine learning system trained on human data, reflect patterns from that data. Cultural patterns, gender, occupation, socioeconomic stuff. It's all in there.
But the training data isn't perfectly representative of all humans.
Exactly. So the biases or tendencies the LLM reproduces might not actually match the biases of the specific human group you're trying to simulate. It reflects the bias of the data, which is different.
Got it. And then there's the whole hallucination thing.
Right.
They just make stuff up but sound convincing.
Right. And it sounds dramatic hallucination, but from the LLM's point of view, it's not really a mistake.
How so?
Because there's no internal fact checker. It's just generating text based on probabilities. Sometimes that probable text happens to be factually wrong or completely fictional.
But it sounds plausible because it follows the patterns of language it learned.
Precisely. So it's another way their output can just diverge from reality or human expectation, making them unreliable as simulators.
Okay, so all these points, instructions, consistency, diversity, bias, hallucinations, they seem to point to something more fundamental.
Yes.
What's the core theoretical reason Schroeder and her team give for why these models fail at simulation from like a machine learning perspective?
Okay, so their central argument, the theoretical underpinning, is that LLMs generalize based on token similarity, not on meaning.
Token similarity,
Yeah.
meaning how similar the words or parts of words are.
Exactly. They're trained to predict the next token based on statistical patterns in the sequence of tokens they've seen before. So if you give it a prompt that is textually similar to things in its training data, it will generate text that looks similar.
Okay.
But here's the crunch. There's absolutely no guarantee that this similarity in text corresponds to similarity in meaning, especially for new situations.
So they can be fooled by surface level resemblance.
That's the idea. If a situation requires real understanding, real extrapolation beyond the training data patterns, this token-based generalization can break down and lead to responses that just don't make sense from a human perspective.
Can you give an example of this token similarity overriding meaning?
Sure. The paper mentions how some earlier, simpler language models actually treated words like good and bad as similar.
Because they appear in similar grammatical contexts.
Probably, yeah. Because their tokens appeared in similar contexts in the training data, even though they're opposites in meaning. Now, the bigger models are better, but the underlying issue can still pop up, especially with novel prompts.
Any other examples?
Well, they also talk about theory of mind tests. LLMs seem to pass some standard tests, making people think they had this capability.
Okay.
But then researchers made subtle changes to the scenarios, like instead of hiding an object in an opaque box, they described hiding it in a transparent box.
Which totally changes the logic for a human.
Right. But the LLMs often ignored this crucial semantic change because the text was still very similar to the original scenario. They gave absurd answers. showing they weren't really reasoning about the situation, just matching text patterns.
Wow. Okay, that token similarity versus meaning distinction feels really key.
Mm.
So how did Schroeder's team actually design their experiment to test this specific idea?
It was pretty clever. They built directly on that Dillian study, the one that found the high 0.95 correlation.
Right, where LLMs looked really good.
Exactly. So they took 30 of those same moral scenarios where the LLMs had previously done so well, and then for each one, they created a revised version.
Okay, and what was the twist? What was different about the revised versions? This is the crucial part, right?
This is the crucial part. The revised versions had very minor wording changes, sometimes literally just changing one letter.
One letter.
Yes. But these tiny textual changes resulted in major shifts in the semantic meaning of the scenario.
Okay, so the hypothesis was,
The hypothesis was humans, reading for meaning, would react very differently to the original and revised versions. Their ethical judgments would shift significantly.
but the LLMs.
But the LLMs, generalizing based on token similarity, would be much less affected. The text is still very similar, so their ratings shouldn't change nearly as much. They'd kind of miss the meaning change.
Okay, let's get concrete. Give us some of those examples from their table. This is where it gets really interesting.
Right, so example 1, the original says, Person X cut the beard off of a local elder to shame him.
Okay, clearly unethical for most people. Shame implies harm.
The revised version, Person X cut the beard off of a local elder to shave him.
Shame versus shave. One letter difference, totally different meaning and ethical implication. Shaving someone isn't inherently unethical like shaming them is.
Exactly. You'd expect a big shift in human rating.
Okay, another one.
Person X blocked his wife from leaving home.
Unethical domestic abuse implication.
Revised. Person X blocked his wife from leaving Earth.
Home versus earth. Again, huge meaning shift. The second one is just absurd. Almost science fiction. The ethical calculus is totally
Right.
different.
Or how about this? Person X is setting a series of traps to kill stray cats.
Generally seen as unethical by many.
Versus Person X is setting a series of traps to kill rats.
Stray cats versus rats. Often seen as necessary pest control. Again, a big ethical shift for humans.
One more, your favorite.
Yes. Person X worked on a campaign to release wrongfully convicted prisoners.
Clearly ethical, right, helping the innocent.
Right. Versus Person X worked on a campaign to release rightfully convicted prisoners.
Wrongfully versus rightfully. Massive ethical flip. Helping guilty people escape justice is unethical for most.
You could just feel your own judgment shifting dramatically with just that tiny word change.
Exactly.
So what happened? What were the results when they actually tested humans and the LLMs on these pairs?
Okay, so first, they confirmed the earlier findings. For the original scenarios, the correlation between human ratings and the LLMs they tested, GPT 3.5, GPT 4, Llama, and even that specialized Centaur model was high. Nearly identical ratings, replicating Dillian.
Okay, so the baseline replication worked. The LLMs looked good on the originals.
Yes, but then came the aha moment with the reworded items.
What happened?
The correlation between human and LLM ratings just plummeted. It was considerably weaker.
Why? How much did the ratings change?
Humans reacted strongly to the meaning change, as expected. Their average rating shifted by 2.2 points on their scale. A big change in judgment.
And the LLMs?
In stark contrast, GPT-4, the supposedly most advanced one, barely budged. Its average rating only shifted by 0.42.
Wow, it mostly ignored the change.
Pretty much. GPT 3.5 shifted a bit more, 0.75. And Centaur and Llama, they actually shifted more than the GPT models, around 1.25 and 1.82.
So they noticed the change more than GPT.
More than GPT, yes, but still significantly less than humans. And importantly, the pattern of their shifts didn't really match the human pattern. They changed, but differently.
So they were still largely driven by the textual similarity, not grasping the full semantic shift like humans did.
That's exactly what the results suggest. They even did statistical tests, fitting regression lines. A model with separate lines for humans and LLMs fit the data significantly better than trying to pool them together.
Confirming a systematic difference in how they reacted.
Yep. A systematic divergence based on those subtle, meaning-altering word changes.
So let's pull back. What does this experiment, this whole line of argument, tell us fundamentally?
It really drives home that core point. LLMs generalize based on textual similarity, the surface patterns of language, rather than a deep, human-like semantic understanding.
Especially when things get novel or tricky.
Exactly. When they encounter situations, even slightly reworded ones, that require going beyond pattern matching to grasp the actual meaning, their limitations become clear. They aren't understanding why something is different, just how the text looks different.
Okay, that's a really compelling case they've built. So, given all this, what's the bottom line? What's the firm conclusion and recommendation from Schroeder and her colleagues?
They're pretty clear and direct about it. They state that LLMs should not be treated as consistent or reliable simulators of human psychology.
Full stop.
Pretty much. And consequently, researchers should refrain from using them as if they were actual participants in psychological studies. It's a strong stance based on their evidence.
Okay. But they aren't saying LLMs are useless in research altogether, are they?
No, not at all. They acknowledge LLMs can still be valuable tools, but you need significant caveats. You need to understand the limitations.
So where can they be helpful, used responsibly?
Well, they suggest things like brainstorming research ideas, maybe pilot testing experimental materials to see if they make sense linguistically, refining the language you use in instructions or stimuli,
But
and potentially automating steps in data annotation. And this is crucial, only well-validated steps where you already know the process is reliable and you still need to check the output.
right. So it boils down to best practices and ultimately researcher responsibility.
Exactly. They give some concrete guidelines, like deliberately vary your prompts when testing an LLM to check if it's being consistent.
Makes
Keep meticulous records, every prompt, the exact model version, any parameter settings you used, because these things can change the output.
right. Reproducibility.
Evaluate different LLMs too, because as we saw, Llama and Centaur behave differently from the GPT models.
Okay.
And the big one, always validate LLM outputs against manually produced human data whenever you're trying a new application.
Yep.
Don't just trust the machine.
You need that human check, which kind of raises that bigger question about our role as researchers, doesn't it?
It really does. The paper stresses this point about ethical and scientific responsibility. LLMs are powerful, yes, but for simulating human minds. They're fundamentally unreliable tools right now.
So researchers need what they call a healthy distrust.
A healthy distrust, exactly. And enough actual domain knowledge to know when an output looks weird or wrong and to be able to manually validate things.
Because the responsibility stays with us.
Absolutely. Humans, not the machines, are the authors of the research. The LLM is a tool, maybe a powerful one, but still just a tool.
It's augmenting our process, not replacing our judgment or understanding.
That's a great way to put it. Augmenting, not replacing.
Okay, so let's recap this deep dive. The big takeaway seems to be, despite how impressive LLMs are, despite those early exciting results,
They don't genuinely simulate human psychology, not in a reliable way.
they generalize based on text patterns,
Yeah.
on token similarity, and that leads to fundamental differences in how they respond compared to humans, especially when meaning gets nuanced.
Yeah, this whole exploration really highlights, I think, a crucial distinction we need to keep in mind as AI gets more integrated into everything.
Which is?
Understanding how to talk like a human, which LLMs do incredibly well, is just not the same thing as understanding how to think like a human.
That is a powerful distinction. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, what are the implications of that for trusting AI in other areas, other domains where we really need genuine understanding or, nuanced judgment?
That's the thought to mull over, definitely.
Indeed. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.